Hi, and welcome to the Boat Princess podcast. My name is Nona Vaux, and I'm your host. I am a boat owner, a marinas owner, an international conference presenter, and a huge advocate for boating. I'm sharing the stories from every nook of the boating industry with the intention of encouraging more women to join me and for more women to get behind the helm too. I want to share the experiences and opportunities of boating, of the boating industry, and I want you to join me as I bring the conversations and answer all the questions you've had. Boating is not just for the glamorous and rich and famous. It's full of beautiful and interesting people making the most of our natural environment and getting out there enjoying the waterways. So let's let off the lines, take over the helm, and escape to the world of boating. Have you followed me on LinkedIn as Nona Vaux, the Boat Princess? I'll be posting details on what's going on in the boating industry, and you can also connect with me if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast and share your business story. Welcome to another episode of the Boat Princess podcast. I've got a really interesting one for you today because this is all about the new technologies coming to the boating industry. We have got the first robot interview on the Boat Princess podcast. Of course, I'm not interviewing real robots, of course. I'm interviewing the amazing, incredible people that are creating them. So Lily Peel and Tom Loeffler, welcome to the Boat Princess podcast.
Hi.
Nice to have you here. So, Lily, tell me, let's go back a little bit into you and kind of how you've ended up in this part of the industry. So tell me about how your boating world started.
Yeah, so I was born into the boating world. My dad is a shipwright and my parents run a boat building restoration company. So I've been around boats my whole life, have learned to sail since I was 7, so I've always been sailing. I went to uni, did industrial design at UNSW, and during that time I was working at the Super Yacht Marina here in Rozelle as a marina attendant, and Hullbot moved in and I sort of met Tom, our CEO and co-founder, and over the years sort of watched Hullbot grow and develop, and by the time I finished uni they were ready to sort of launch out into the world and needed an operations and sales manager, and I came on board.
So that's you.
Yeah.
I love that. And Tom, what about you? Where did your whole boating world start?
Yeah, I was introduced by sailing by my mother, who actually sailed across the Atlantic when she was 19 years old, having no idea what she was doing, but a great sense of adventure. And that's been our experience of boating. A lot of family sailing trips, always having boats. I sailed as a kid and absolutely love the adventure and wild places and so on. So I grew up diving and surfing and snorkeling and in and on the water, and done most of my sailing on Hobie Cats.
Right. Okay. So in the water a lot with Hobie Cats. Love those.
Yeah.
But that's really interesting that your mum did that. I mean, that's a very strong woman that does that. So why did she do that? Where did that come from for her?
Her and her boyfriend saw a sign in the Cape Town yacht squadron there saying crew wanted to sail across the Atlantic to the West Indies. And they met the guy who'd built the boat himself. It's a 38-foot ketch. And they set off navigating by the stars with no radio, 2 couples and a cat. And sometime during the journey, her boyfriend realized that it was getting really cold and thought he might learn some navigation too, to check on the skipper's maths.
Yeah.
And at that point realized that they were 45 degrees off course and were heading steadily into the Southern Ocean rather than towards the West Indies. She was presumed lost at sea and ended up giving her distraught parents a very welcome phone call from Rio de Janeiro about 8 weeks after she was supposed to have made landfall. So that story was always there in our family. Mum would always say, I sailed across the Atlantic, and Mum loved wild places, and we're lucky enough to have a lot of her artwork here on the walls at Hullbot from Antarctica. And so, yeah, we grew up with a love of taking care of nature and wanting to do something about climate change and restoring wild environments. And so, yeah, that's my love of boats, comes from the ability to go places in them and do cool things with them. So,
wow, that is quite a story. I'm glad I asked that question. And Lily, you've had some serious sailing experiences, I can imagine, as well. Is there any, can we top that, or can we meet that, or?
I didn't. My sailing experience is very much. I grew up sailing on Sydney Harbour, and so I sail Cherubs at the moment, which are a 12-foot skiff sailed by 2 people. I sail with another girl, Kathy, and for me, sailing has just been being surrounded by the most wonderful and lovely people, and being able to go to incredible places up and down the East Coast. I've sailed all around Australia. It's been such an amazing experience and opens up an incredible gateway of this community of people that are just, they're my family. They're my people that I'm going to spend the rest of my life going on holidays with and hanging out with, and the romance as well around boats. I come from a timber boat family as well, so it's very much the idea of romance and caring for boats and making sure they have longevity and they're there for a really long time and they're contributing to the ocean and its well-being, and the way that we interact with the water isn't it's not disposable. It's got that longevity to it, and it's got that community around it, which, yeah, so not as wild as sailing across the Atlantic, but yeah, had a few good rides on the boats, that's for sure.
I will say that Lily is an incredible sailor, just an absolute natural as a skipper, and we've had some fun sails together. And I've learned a lot even on the few trips we've had, and you've taught quite a lot of people to sail too, haven't you?
Yeah, I've since I think 14 was when I sort of started teaching sailing. So yeah, I spent a lot of my youth teaching sailing, mainly in the Sabos and then into the Flying 11. So doing a lot of courses, teaching kids, taking kids to nationals, being their coach at nationals. Being involved in that respect, and then now have a lot of involvement in the sort of committee level of the sailing clubs, and that organisation level of allowing these big events to happen for other people to enjoy and turn up to.
And there's a few things you mentioned there, which is the thing I love about boating, and that is the community and the family that you feel you have around you because you're into sailing and into boating. I think in society we're losing, we don't know our neighbours, we don't necessarily get so involved in so much volunteer work and all that sort of thing. So that community in boating and sailing, I think, is actually a really important part of why we enjoy being in the boating world. So that's lovely to hear that. So you've both come from a very strong sort of sailing background, and yeah, sailors do tend to have a sort of environmental piece to their love of boating as well, don't they? So here you are at Hullbot. You've created this incredible company. Tom, how did the concept of Hullbot come around?
It's a great question and quite a long story, but
we like long stories.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to always have a workshop growing up, and so had always been making things. I studied design and I worked as a boat builder, and during that time I studied naval architecture for 2.5 years, which wasn't for me, before switching back to industrial design. And Hullbot started as a major project for me at UNSW. I had the opportunity to work on something really interesting. I wanted to work on a robot that solved a big environmental issue and a big economic issue that people would pay for, and was aware that this was one possible option, and I had time to research it. And the more I looked into the problems of biofouling at the global level, not just keeping sailing boat hulls clean, but actually the impact on fuel emissions globally, and the impact of anti-fouling paints on marine life, and of course the invasive species, it seemed like something worth spending a year working on, which has turned into many years now, getting up to 10 years.
Wow, is it 10 years? Goodness, yeah.
Yeah, so along that journey, it started as a concept. What if we cleaned every day? Seemed pretty straightforward. You'd keep the boat clean and you wouldn't have to haul out and recoat, and you wouldn't need divers in the water, and you wouldn't have any invasive species, and the boat would go really fast, and you wouldn't have any emissions and so on. And at that point, everything was possible. You could just make a robot that did that. and we didn't realize, how hard that would be.
Yeah.
And proceeded anyway, and built a number of robots. Carl Watfern, co-founder and CTO, joined super early in the project, and together we founded Hullbot, and the rest's quite a long story, which I'm sure you'll ask about.
So that degree you were doing at Uni of New South Wales, what degree was that?
The same one that Lily did.
So you've both done
industrial design.
Industrial design. Okay.
Yeah. And
that's interesting at the uni when you do your degree like that. They do. My son's about to do the same thing. He's about to do his major project for electronic engineering. So it makes you think, doesn't it? You've got to sit back and think, okay, what am I going to do? And for you guys, that has now progressed into the business that you now are the founder of. So that's really, really exciting that that is the foundation of it, as it were. So Lily, when you came into Hullbot, how was you obviously come into it from a sailing perspective. What was it you brought to the table, and what has your influence been on the development of Hullbot, do you think?
Yeah, so when I came into Hullbot, it was very early days of sort of going public, of showing people the robot, of going out and cleaning boats regularly, of interacting with customers. So my experience in the boating world sort of prepared me for that customer interaction and customer discovery. And that's sort of what I ended up doing in the company. So I sort of put it out to the world and took over the pilot program, which we've been running in the harbour, I think for 18 months now, and started interacting with customers, started getting new customers on board, demoing the product to different people, so taking it to clubs, taking it to associations around the harbour, and really starting the process of education and teaching people about what we're doing, our mission, our goal, our values, and how the robot works, and sort of, starting that conversation around the community of boating of there's another way for us to tackle this problem, and there's another way for us to help care for our oceans and still enjoy that lifestyle of boating that we're all here for as well.
Well, that's right. I mean, we really, as boaters, have to look after our oceans, because if we don't, that's our environment of enjoyment lost. So we do have to be incredibly careful about that. So getting in out there was really your role that you're doing there. It's a real education piece. You've got to be strongly getting out there. What sort of mediums have you used to expose the product to your potential client base?
Yeah, so a lot of what we've done is more or less word of mouth at the moment. We've had some really, really strong advocates that have taken on our product and sort of embraced it in its fullest, a lot of which are from Royal Sydney Yacht Squadron, is sort of our base at the moment, that we're dealing with a lot of the really wonderful members there, and they've really taken Hullbot in their stride. And we've gotten to a point now where I can stand on the dock with the members from the squadron, and they'll explain Hullbot to someone else for us, and with the same level of enthusiasm that we have for our product and our company. So yeah, been doing a lot of word of mouth, being out there, cleaning the boats, social media, LinkedIn. We've been involved in a lot of really amazing competitions that we've been lucky enough to win. The Pitch Fest was one of the ones that we recently have won, so got a lot of media attention out of that as well, which was really helpful. But yeah, just...
I would say we've done quite a lot of direct outreach to specific individuals who can both be early adopters themselves, but spread through their networks. We've found Instagram to be a powerful tool for communicating us as a startup, but maybe doesn't have the uptake within the customer segment that we've been primarily targeting.
Because they're too young.
Gentlemen sailing races.
Well, no, they're too old.
Too young
Instagram's too young.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And, Hullbot has applications across a wide variety of different segments. So we started with sailors because sailors understand the importance of keeping the hull clean.
Yep.
And are already using divers as regularly as they should for the most part. And so we've been very lucky to be able to deploy a product successfully in that segment for over 2 years now. But we're expanding into other areas, which...
Yeah, I was going to ask you, which sort of markets are you targeting? Commercial or just in sailing?
Yeah.
Or what are you
Yeah.
what's the big goal in terms of the markets you want to tap into?
Absolutely. So from day one, we've wanted to make the robot from technology that was affordable enough to ultimately enable one robot on every boat in the world. No matter how big or small, it'll have access to a robot that goes in the water and cleans the hull once a day or overnight so that the boat remains clean at all times. And that was a pretty ambitious goal.
Yeah.
And so we realized pretty early on, let's make a few less robots and let's use them on lots of boats. And so we offer fortnightly cleaning to sailors.
Okay.
And that's what we called the pilot program, and we've been doing that for a couple of years now. But the vision is to deploy robots through marinas and charter fleets, where a small number of units can clean many hulls.
Yeah.
To deploy robots on ferries, where we offer clean hulls as a service, saving them fuel and reducing their other operational headaches. And then to make slightly larger robots, which are applicable across the fishing and naval and commercial fleets at large.
And cruise ships, we're going to get that big?
We will get into cruise ships, both for the hulls and for propeller cleaning. And we should mention that Hullbot does inspections as well as cleaning, which means it's an excellent tool for port security, for hull surveys and inspections and monitoring of invasive species and condition of structures and so on. So we're heading in a lot of different directions.
Yeah.
And our focus is on charter fleets, marinas, and clubs, concentrations of smaller recreational vessels, and on ferry fleets, which is our, it's probably our single biggest focus at the moment.
Yeah. I can see Lily wanted to say something when I said cruise ships. What was Lily wanting to say then?
I was just going to put it into context for the listeners. Our robot at the moment that we have is about the size of a backpack or a case of beer, whatever reference you want to use.
It's a very Australian reference.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're pretty small, compact units that where we've got at the moment, which have that ability to scale up for cruise ships or cargo containers and so on.
Yeah, because I remember that. That moment in New Zealand when that cruise ship was going to go into New Zealand, but they said, no, you can't come in because you've got an invasive species on the hull. And divers had to go out to that open ocean and dive underneath that cruise ship and deal with that. I would much prefer a robot doing that than good human beings.
So we think it's about 6% of vessels failed their biosecurity requirements of New Zealand last year.
There you go.
And so that's increasing. Now, Australia actually has the same regulations, but at the moment, we're not enforcing them. And part of that is to know what's there, you need to put divers in the water.
Yes.
Or robots in the water. So this is coming, and it's going to change the way boat hulls are maintained, but also the way we keep waterways protected from invasive species and ports secure in general. So
yeah,
very exciting.
Yeah. So before we continue that amazing interview with our current guest, a little interlude from us here at the Boat Princess. If you'd like to be a guest on the Boat Princess, simply send us an expression of interest to our email at info@theboatprincess.com or send us a DM on Instagram. We are The Boat Princess on Instagram, and we'll send you our media kit and details as to how we work. The podcast is incredibly popular worldwide, and there is nothing like getting 45 minutes or so of somebody's ears entirely dedicated to what you're trying to achieve, or perhaps what your company is trying to achieve. So we look forward to hearing from you. So I'm guessing the ideal scenario, I mean, yeah, we're talking about a lot of boats in the world, right?
Yep.
But I mean, I think there's 12.5 million boats in the US alone. So yeah, that was a big goal, putting a Hullbot on every boat.
We'll get there.
Well,
so recreational boats I'm talking about, we're not even getting into the shipping. So I guess the ideal scenario for Hullbot is that when you buy a boat, you buy a Hullbot too, so that you never anti-foul the boat, because that is actually the ideal, I'm guessing. Is that correct?
Correct. So it's quite complicated, and everything's complicated about Hullbot. We've got underwater robots. Every boat's different. Every owner's different. Every use case is different, and so on. So to simplify it a little bit, we can clean hulls that have traditional soft ablative anti-foul by using soft brushes, using the robot very gently, and just carefully taking the slime off the surface of that soft anti-foul. We prefer to clean hard anti-fouls, which we can maintain in awesome condition by cleaning every 2 weeks or so. But of course, anti-fouling's really harmful to the environment and needs to be reapplied. So we're an excellent solution for using silicone anti-fouls, where we would clean every week and again get that excellent performance, or no anti-foul at all, which you're right, is our ultimate goal.
Yeah.
What if vessels are painted with a durable epoxy or a decent gel coat finish, and then they're maintained by robots every couple of days, and that'll keep them in amazing condition and stop hundreds of millions of liters of paint, which is micro and nanoplastics, entering the ocean, as well as all the biocides and all of the oils in the other products and so on, which enter and pollute waterways. So whether it's a brand new boat or not, we want to move people towards hard coatings that don't damage the environment and cleaning them with the robot.
Yeah, because it's actually the DIYs that are more likely to use the ablative than the professionals that use the hard, right? So my head's thinking about this right now. In terms of Hullbot cleaning the hull when it's already got an anti-foul on it, does the anti-foul not then enter the water column because it's being taken off by Hullbot? Tell me about that.
Yeah, so it's actually really interesting. We have observed divers cleaning boats, and I'm sure you have, and other people. You see that big plume that comes off, that dyed plume of anti-foul that comes off, mainly from the ablative anti-fouls, because that's how they're designed to work. When we actually attach a Hullbot to the boat, it doesn't produce that plume. There's a lot less anti-foul coming off, and we've had quite a few independent yards sort of give feedback back to owners and say the anti-foul's in better condition to what it previously had been when divers were caring for the boat. So because it's a robot, and not a human, you can take out that human error. So it's the same pressure being applied to the entire hull. It's varied pressure depending on what the paint is and what the boat is. So it's a much more even clean of a hull, which means that you have a little bit less impact. It's not ideal that we're cleaning boats with anti-foul. Our end goal is we want to not be cleaning boats with anti-foul, but this is the first step in changing an industry that's been the same for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
We still need to go through that process of education and learning and seeing how this industry can adapt to new technology like this. And that'll be a longer process, but we're hoping we'll get there.
So that turbidity of that plume the fish have to swim through is much lower with Hullbot than it is with, as you say, the divers, which I've never been a fan of the divers going under, and one, because it's so dangerous for them, but two, because that you can see it. It's the anti-foul coming off into the water.
Yeah, it's a common question, will the robot damage my anti-foul? And and also, what does cleaning mean? So ideally, cleaning happens very regularly, right? And some sailors do it fortnightly or weekly. A lot of other boats don't clean at all or nearly often enough. And if you clean infrequently, you're removing shells. And if you're removing shells, you're using a lot of force and you're probably damaging the coating below and removing, significant amounts of coating. And the impact of that is everything that's taken off during that intensive, infrequent clean ends up in the water. And the end result is the coatings below are damaged, the hull condition is rougher, and that leads to the boat fouling quicker and not performing as well in the first place. Thus, people sometimes have a hesitation to clean, whether it's with a robot or whether it's with a diver. And you see this night and day difference between people who clean regularly, who swear by it, and they might use a hard, and they pay for divers, or they pay for our cleaning service, and their hull is in a much better condition year round. They get a longer life from their anti-foul. They extend the time between reapplications. And we love seeing people make that, when you can see someone see it, the transition happen, and they've never done it before. It's really awesome to see how stoked they are and how much of an advocate they become.
Yeah, I think that's the really interesting thing. Our robot navigates underwater using cameras, and it takes photos of what it sees under the water, produces maps, and that's then how our robot navigates on its own underwater. So an extension of that is that we offer a before and after report to visually show the condition of the hull. So it's really incredible to watch the customer journey of people as they come on board with Hullbot go, no, my boat only needs to be cleaned every 3 months. I don't want it cleaned any more frequently than that. You give people an underwater view of what their hull looks like, and suddenly it's like, oh, it's really bad. Okay, no, we'll do it every month now.
Yeah, especially in Sydney Harbour.
Yeah, and then you have that progression of people wanting to clean their boat more regularly, because boat hulls are very out of sight, out of mind. People watch, the side of their boat and they go, oh, it needs a wash. I can see that it's dirty. It needs to be polished. But the underside of people's boats, the norm is to just get it lifted yearly, and that's sort of what the industry standard is at the moment. So to be able to show people what's happening under the water and have that level of education as well through our technology is really incredible. And yeah, it's a night and day difference between boats that are maintained on a monthly or a fortnightly basis versus boats that either aren't maintained at all other than their yearly lift, or boats that are looked after, every few months.
Yeah, and there is a huge difference between boat owners in that space. I think we need to educate while we hear about anti-fouls in general, that having a professional do your anti-foul on a boat can make a massive difference to just how good that anti-foul is and how long it lasts, but also where your boat lives. So, for example, if a boat lives in my marina at Empire Marina Bobbin Head, at one of mine, then the growth is very slow. If it lives in Sydney Harbour, in certain areas of Sydney Harbour, it's incredibly fast. So the fact that you can pop the Hullbot onto it to allow that length of that anti-foul to go longer on a Sydney Harbour boat is really good. But also the quality of the application of the anti-foul in the first place is really important. So we, for example, use a hard, and we do it actually as thin as we possibly can, because that is what it should be, because the more we put on, the heavier the boat gets. And again, we're back down to fuel consumption again, right? And it will build over a number of years, and then you have to have it sandblasted and blah, blah, blah. But what I am interested to ask you guys is, I totally get especially for the sailors that are racing, they really need a clean hull all the time. But I'm guessing we're suggesting Hullbot is it's kind of an in addition to, not anti-fouling as such, but potentially lifting and caring for the boats, because it is actually incredibly important that we lift our boats once a year, not necessarily for anti-fouling, although that's what we normally do at the moment now, but hopefully Hullbot will change that. But there are things that we check when we lift a boat every year. So it's things like the shafts are not wobbling around. It's things like the skin fittings are okay. It's things like the props are actually as they should be. And that's actually a really important thing. So I do think we need to educate here that having a Hullbot is not the only solution to the care of your hull. So, Tom, talk to me about that.
Yeah, so I would agree. It's really important that boats come out of the water. And the question is, when do they come out of the water? And when are these things that you're talking about detected? So if we could pull boats out after there's a problem with a prop, and say we detect that with the robot's cameras, and then book it in for a lift to fix that problem, rather than doing them on the cycle of coatings and saying, look, the prop's a bit damaged and we're probably using 5%, 10% more fuel, but we'll fix that when we come out in 9 months' time for a recoat, right? We should be inspecting these things continuously and pulling boats out to do whatever needs to be done at the time that makes sense for that purpose, rather than on the cycle of docking. The other thing I would mention that's important is the impact of even very early stage slime on fuel consumption is not necessarily well understood.
Yep.
We think that the more regularly one cleans, the more and more benefit there is in terms of fuel savings. So the idea is not to mitigate the growth of the occasional shell or not let the shells get too bad, but it's actually to keep the hull free of even the slightest amount of slime year round. And we're validating that at the moment by cleaning ferries, which have very consistent and detailed data on their fuel consumption. And it shows that, cleaning the hulls regularly with a robot saves a lot more fuel than cleaning intermittently with divers. And you're absolutely right. We've had these discussions with a number of people who've said, we inspect just when we're supposed to. So we might inspect this fishing vessel at every 2 years, and we pull it out for an intermediate docking at 3 years, and the coatings last 3 years, and we don't dive because diving damages the coating and so on. And you have a look at the hull. Not only is the hull in bad condition, but there are lots of problems that really should be fixed straight away. And that boat should come up and have those problems fixed in, say, a 12 or 24-hour period, and then be put back in the water straight away so that it can have the benefits from those repairs early, rather than doing this block of work in line with the painting cycles. So you're totally right. Boats have to come out of the water. There are other technologies that have a role to play for sure. Ultrasonics have a place in certain areas. Anodes and cathodic protection is really important, and it depends on where the boat is and how often it moves. But there's a lot of boats that have, as you were just mentioning, a pretty poor paint job, and they stretch it as far as they can, and all that paint goes into the water, and the hull is fouled year round, and it's being damaged by the growth, and the opportunity to move more people up towards what it could be like and save them money in the process it's really massive.
Well, this is it. Yeah, this is the thing. I mean, as a marina, we're always telling our owners, lift your boat every year, because like you say, we can find the small problems that may be there that we can fix quickly. If you leave it in the water for 3 years, yeah, sure, we've got slow growth, so you could leave it a bit longer if you wanted to. But if you leave it in the water for 3 years, that can be a really big problem. My good friend Darren Gatt was at the marina yesterday. He's a big fan, and he of you guys, I mean, and he said that he's electrolysis specialist, so he can, if your boat's got an electrolysis issue and you leave it in the water for 3 years, you can have props that no longer exist because they've completely been eaten away. So this whole aspect that your robot continuously can inspect the boat underwater is really exciting, because it's not only, a person's boat that can be looked after, but I see a future for people like boat syndication companies, boat club companies, where, often you'll have a syndication owner come back to the marina and they've had a lovely time out on the boat and they didn't mention that they want to ground. But the next person gets onto the boat and then say, oh, there's a bit of vibration in the prop going on. Can you check that out? But that is somebody 4 times down because the 3 people before that are not really boaties. But the 4th person that's got onto the boat has said, oh, there's a bit of vibration in the engines. Can you check that out? The share company then checks out the prop and it's got a bend or a chip or whatever in the prop. If they've got a Hullbot sitting on that boat, they could pop it down for an inspection after each use, presumably, and then solve that there and then. Am I right?
Yeah. So that's you've hit the nail on the head there. Syndicate companies, generally what happens is they'll bring their boats back after someone's used it and they religiously check that boat. And when you're operating a syndicate company out of the Whitsundays or the Northern Territory, where it's not always safe to have a diver go in the water and you've got that human risk element, having a robot have that capability to go in the water every time that boat comes back in and do a full inspection and make sure that that boat's in safe working order is a really, really vital tool we see.
And it's important to realize that not all inspections are created equal, right? We are fundamentally a robot company that uses computer vision and AI and machine learning as the means by which the robot finds its way around underwater. And that unlocks doing digital comparisons between things where you will pick up changes that are not obvious to the human eye. So rather than comparing one photo to another photo, you're comparing a 3D scan to a 3D scan and understanding even small changes over time. So we love the boat syndication and, product as a service model there. We think it's a really great way for a lot of people to experience boating and to have a lower impact. And it enables the cost of doing things which are more environmentally friendly or more advanced to be amortized over the whole fleet. So to give you a sense of how we would deploy in that context, our robot has a base station, which we call a pod. So we have a robot and pod system. The pod is able to lower the robot into the water on its cable, manage that tether whilst it's in the water, and then retract it out again, where it then recharges and is ready to deploy a couple of hours later.
So
And
can you time it to do that, or does
Yeah.
you manually do it? You can do it automatically as a timing thing. So
Yes.
as a syndication or a club, you could say every night at midnight, the Hullbot goes down, does this check, and then comes back up again.
That's right. And
Okay.
so what you would do is say if you have 10 boats, you'd have one robot and pod system there, and you'd move it between berths every, couple of times a day, and it would then deploy and clean and scan that vessel. And our team is able to monitor and manage that remotely, meaning that no one on site needs to understand too much about how the robot's working or have any special training or know-how. As long as this backpack-sized unit is in the right location, we can schedule it or connect to it, and suddenly there's a robot in the water cleaning and inspecting. And so that reduces the cost quite significantly, as you can imagine, and means we can do a lot of boats that are in a concentrated location very often and very efficiently and deliver a lot of value. And that's the model we
save
see.
a lot of time for those boat share guys looking on all the video, the trackers of
Yeah.
Now where have they been and what have they done?
Yeah, and that's the model we want to do for syndications and fleets.
Yep. And clubs and so on.
And clubs and so on.
Yeah.
And for marinas, it's similar. A number of robot and pod systems on site can deliver weekly or fortnightly cleans for dozens and dozens of vessels without requiring people to travel there or to learn anything about how the product works. So.
And Lily, because you're monitoring that system from here, so it's doing its thing and you can see what it's doing here, are you a bit like a security company that's looking after the alarm at home in terms of if something goes wrong with it, you can detect that and get it sorted? Is that how it works as well?
Yeah, definitely. It would be an evolving system of you'd have people located in the office, software engineers, electrical engineers, who would be monitoring that system and making sure that it's being deployed and as safe as possible. And if there is an issue that arises, then we're first point of call that can look after and deal with that issue, be it a hardware problem that we get sent out and deal with it on site, or be it a software issue that can be fixed via the internet here from our office.
Okay.
So we're offering this as a service. We're not selling the robots to people. We're enabling
I see.
operators.
So it's like a
Subscription.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the hardware is on location.
Yep.
Be that at a marina, on a particular vessel, or being shared by a club, and then there's an ongoing fee that's calculated based on the size of the vessel and the frequency of cleaning, and then we take on the responsibility for everything related to the robot remaining functional and its charging, its spare parts, its maintenance, and all of those things. And that enables,
Well, it
customers
enables
to
people
adopt
not to
it.
have to invest.
Yeah.
I'm guessing those robots are worth a fair amount of money, right? So, if you're doing it in that method, it becomes far like boat clubs and boat syndication. Frankly, it makes that far more available to a bigger group of people, doesn't it?
And that's how we've been operating as well with this pilot that we've been doing in Sydney Harbour. Is we have every month people pay a subscription fee, and that fee is determined by how many cleans that they have during that month. So you have that monthly reoccurring payment that you're paying, and then you get your report with that as well that shows you the condition of the hull, and you get that updated information as you go along. So you're subscribing to a service. You're not having a product that then you need to learn how to use and implement and put in your boat, and it's not your responsibility as such. It's a service and it's a system that you're giving money for every month, and then we deal with all the hard stuff.
Okay, so you mentioned earlier on at one of the clubs you've got a robot doing cleans at certain boats every 2 weeks. So that subscription, presumably, how does that work? Does it spread across those boats, or does each individual boat owner pay for 2 weeks? How does that work?
That they're individual boat owners paying for a fortnightly clean who have an ongoing direct relationship with Hullbot, where we provide a clean and monitored hull as a service.
Okay. And how do you liaise with the club in terms of installing that Hullbot in? Presumably it's on the marina somewhere. Yeah. So how do you liaise with that?
So we have been operating this pilot for the most part without the pods, because a lot of those vessels are on moorings. And so we travel to them and move the robot around. But we have partnerships with a number of marinas where we've demonstrated the pod. It's fully functional, able to deploy and retract the robot, and do all of those things. And it's it varies based on the location. Do you want to mount it on a boat? Do you want to mount it on the dock? Do you want more pods, or do you want to move them more often? We can vary all these things over time. The robot that we've done the majority of our hull cleaning with, that people will see on our website at hullbot.com, is about 3 years old now, and is being replaced at the moment by a new robot that a lot of our customers have seen, but that we haven't shared with everybody yet. That we'll launch later this year. And that robot is, as you would imagine, better in every way, faster, stronger, smarter, able to do more things the other one couldn't do, and really is going to change the way that we operate. We think that robot is suited to vessels up to around 200 feet. And again, ultimately, we are going to be putting robots, whether it's one on every boat or several on bigger boats.
Yeah.
We've got the ambition to get this out there and offer it to people of all walks of life and at all price points. For the moment, clubs and syndicates and ferries are really our targets.
Okay. So we're going to continue that interview in a second episode of the Boat Princess podcast. So that will be the one following this one. So we thought we'd spread it over 2 episodes for you. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. It's always great to have your ears on board. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you on the water soon.